Just a little preventative maintenance and some gentle loving care for this old archtop today. This is an Epiphone Ritz from 1942 or 43. The owner indicates that it was previously in the collection of Norah Jones's touring guitarist, Kevin Bright, who has played on a lot of award-winning albums and worked with some big names like Cassandra Wilson, Katie Lang, Roseanne Cash. According to his website, most of his working instruments are made by Joseph Yanizello, who is a maker I really admire. I'd love to see some of his guitars up close. Hasn't happened yet. Anyway, why don't guitars have like little ownership record cards like they used to have in the back of library books? Be useful. Anyway, this is a fairly recent acquisition, I believe. Needs a bit of care. There's some thin cracks along the edge down here that we want to make sure are glued up. Pickguard is riding a little bit high. Not dirty, just high. It's actually sort of above the level of the E string as you near the bridge here, which could cramp your style. So we'll probably have to bend that bracket a bit and make it more manageable. The owner wants a strap button in the heel, which it doesn't currently have, and the one that's here as the end pin is worn down in such a way that it doesn't really want to hold the strap very securely, just slips right off. That spells danger. So we're going to plug the hole and put in a screw type that'll match the one in the heel. And this is obviously not its first tailpiece. There are a few miscellaneous screw holes which could also be plugged. We're just in the opening stages of celluloid rot in the binding here, so we're going to saturate those with some super glue and try and slow down the process some. There's also a fairly large chunk that's missing here, and that's in a place where you could easily catch it on your shirt, tearing a lot of binding off with it, so we should fill that. The Ritz was a workhorse archtop for Epiphone. It shows up in 1940. It lasted until 49. So this is a jazz band, dance hall era guitar designed for rhythm playing. Not the most expensive, but it's not a budget guitar. It's a professional instrument. This has got a natural finish, or blonde, which when we think of the era is maybe a little less common than the sunburst. You could hide a lot of sins under the paint on a sunburst. This has got a beautiful figured maple back. It's veneer. This guitar has laminated back and sides with a solid spruce top. One thing a little unusual about this model is it's got a cherry wood neck. What? Yeah. Don't see that very often. Cherry is a beautiful wood to work with. It carves exceptionally well. It's not as hard as rock maple or hard maple, but it certainly can be used. Funny things happened to the timber market during the war years. A government contract could come down to supply benches and tables for all of the battleships being built at any one time, and then several months of inventory could go right out the door of the lumber supplier. So you go to buy your wood, no maple? Well, what you got? Cherry? Alright. And, like we discussed last semester, this was an era when Epiphone was not a second-class brand. They were in direct competition with Gibson. They were made in Queens, so a lot of New York players picked them up. They did a good job. These are impressive guitars. The action is very nice, just about 4 1/2/64 on the bass side, and just a hair under 4 1/64 on the treble. However, this is another case where there's absolutely no relief in this neck. There might even be some back bow with the 6th string held down at the 1st fret and around the body joint. It's laying right on top of the frets. Consequently, there's some buzzy stuff happening around the 3rd fret, prominent on the 5th string. Which is classic for there being too little relief. No truss rod cover. Oh no. But wait. Oh yes. I think this is one of the earliest body side adjustable truss rods that you're going to find. Let's hope it works. We're a 1940s truss rod. Of course we're going to be a little bit mangled. What Does It Take? Is a power ballad from 1980s Canadian hard rock group Honeymoon Suite. But in this case, what it takes, apparently, oh man, is a 5/32 hex wrench. And this is me backing it off. Nice. You're asking, was it a broken rod? No, that was just squeaky. Now we have a little bit of relief. That is about 6/1000ths relief, which I'm going to call good. Still a little buzzy, and yes, it seems like the 4th fret is high all the way along. As is the 5th fret. And as happens with these old guitars, probably not going to be dressing these frets down because they're around 23/1000ths of an inch tall. 22. So you gotta love old frets, otherwise you gotta replace them. I think it'll be okay. Do the easiest job first. I'm going to remove the pick guard. Once again, we have a mixture of screw styles. We've got a flat head on the front and Phillips on the side. No tuner bushings on this model, or if there were, they're long gone. I unscrewed the tailpiece. I'll try and pull this guy out. We'll glue him back in, as it'll make the perfect sized plug for this situation. Stop whining. Someone can always come back and re-ream this. And I'll also plug up the screw holes of yesteryear. Time to glue cracks. I'll infuse them with some slightly thinned tight bond glue and pump it on through a couple of times. I know this will all seem very familiar to those who've been watching for the last month or so, but this is what life is like for a guitar repair person in winter. Just cracks upon cracks. These areas of celluloid rot are porous, and using thin viscosity CA glue I can saturate them. There'll be a color change as the little voids fill up. You can actually watch it happen. And they'll soak up more glue than you would suspect. It's unclear at this point if this actually halts the process, but it certainly slows it down. For the large missing areas, I switch to a thicker viscosity glue. I'll apply a layer, then set it with activator, add another layer, and so on until it's overfilled. Tackling the high frets, I'm going to pound on them a little bit to make sure they are seated as far as they can be seated. And unfortunately, that did not solve the problem. There's still a bunch of rocking. I'll wick in a little thin super glue to lock them in place as much as possible. Clean that off. And then I'll use a StewMac leveling device, which is like the fret rocker, except it's got an area of fine grit on it. And it's designed to remove material in the center while guiding off the two outside frets. This seems like it's crazy, but it actually works pretty well, in my experience. And let's go back and forth a bit and level those out until they won't rock anymore. That's so nice. Say the line, Bart. I made a little spruce cleat, which I'm going to glue in there. This originally had a small pad of linen glued on either side of the F-hole as a reinforcement, which has failed. And I'll pare back any protuberances left over from the plugging. Then finish up with a liberal dose of orange shellac, which will make things a little less obvious. It won't disguise them completely, but they'll look like they're well taken care of. Putting the tailpiece back on because I need to ascertain the position of the strap button, and if I put it dead center, obviously we'd run afoul of the mounting plate, so this keeps me from drilling too many holes. I'm going to go with some Gibson style buttons. I think they're period appropriate. To get the correct position, I'll take a drill bit of the approximate same size as the interior of the hole, hold this in the correct location, and use that to mark the center. These mounting screws are of a pretty generous length and width, actually, so I should measure them Don't want to end up cracking the tail block or something. So the root diameter, the one that's down in the bottom of the thread, is about 3 millimeters, just over 120 thousandths. The major diameter, the outside of the thread, is about 164 thousandths. So I want something probably in the range of 135, 140 thousandths. This is about 9/64ths of an inch. Feels like a big hole. I promise you it's not. I think I want a little felt spacer in there, just to sort of push the button a little bit farther away from the side, a little bit more room, and act as a cushion. Yeah, there we go. On the heel we need to find a place that's suitable. I'd like something like this that is down towards the end of the dovetail. There's usually a gap of about ½ an inch at the end of the tail. Sometimes it's shorter depending on the model. And kind of, well, it's going to go on at an angle. We don't want it too close to the side because it'll be difficult to put the strap on. And we don't want it too close to the tip, otherwise we're in danger of sort of splitting through the other side of the heel. And this is definitely something we have to pre-drill, and I'd prefer to pre-drill it in a couple of passes and work our way up. So that's pretty much where I want it. Somewhere in there. The finish is slightly chippy. Starting off with a smaller diameter drill bit. I'm sighting and trying to keep things kind of perpendicular to the shape of the heel. It's curved, obviously, but I want to kind of put right angles to that. Now I'll enlarge the hole with a drill of the correct diameter. Again, it looks like a massive hole, doesn't it? But it's not. That's the correct diameter. If we go anything smaller than that, there's a very good chance that we're going to create a crack and split right through the heel. To strengthen the area, I'm going to do what I frequently do and saturate the hole with thin super glue. It acts to firm up the threads that have been chased into the cherry by the screw, and it will also migrate out into the wood around it and stabilize it. And that's how you install a strap button. I'll pare down the blobby super glue fills with a razor blade scraper. Sometimes a file works well. And eventually I'll work my way through sandpaper's 600 grit on up to micro mesh to smooth this surface out. Okay, that's much smoother. There isn't a big gaping hole there anymore. I went around the outline and buffed up the super glue. It takes a pretty nice polish. Okay, work is complete. Very nice. I bent the bracket for the pick guard down a little bit, so now we got about 3/8 of an inch clearance there. It's far less obtrusive. And yeah, the owners decided to go from flat wounds to round wounds. This has got some bronze round wounds on it. Slightly heavier gauge too, I think. Previously I believe they were 11s. These are 12 to 52s. Action is exactly the same as when it came in, which he was happy with. To do that though, because it now has a little bit of relief and slightly thicker strings, I had to drop the saddle all the way down. So there's no more from this point. You know, if something weird started to happen, we might be looking at a neck reset. Frankly, the next thing that should happen is probably a refret, which would also gain back a little bit of height there. But it's very comfortable play. I don't think it's necessary at this point. What is interesting is this guitar has an extremely pronounced radius to the fretboard. This is less than 7 inches. It's somewhere in the 6 range, which feels quite comfortable. It's a little weird. Like bending strings on this would be quite difficult, I think. Although that's not the genre they're usually associated with. And yeah, it's a lovely instrument. Very nice. Last week, you'll recall I tried to do a Patreon appreciation thing. Apparently that didn't work out smoothly. A good many people said they didn't get included. It's a messy spreadsheet to try and download, so I'm doing this again. I've alphabetized it this time for convenience. Some have exceptionally long names, they're just never going to fit. Others have used aliases, which is real shady if you ask me. This list also includes every single person who ever signed up, some of whom are free accounts who've never actually seen beyond the paywall, but I'm a nice guy, so I'll put you on too. Others signed up multiple times, obviously trying to play with my feelings. I'm not so easily swayed, and no, you can't make me cry. I have defense and survival mechanisms from a childhood full of bullying, so you don't stand a chance, mister. Anyway, please accept the heartfelt gratification. I'll try not to do this too often because I know it takes up an awful lot of space at the end of a video. Few of you are actually watching at this point except for those who are trying to see their names. Boy, the music really took a weird turn, didn't it? Of course, I slowed it down too so some people would have a better opportunity to find themselves, and boy, am I regretting that now. I decided to be a wise guy and keep on talking. Is it ever going to end? How are we still only in the R's? And of course it's deceptive because I selected for the first letter rather than the actual last name. Oh well. Let's look towards the end. There's some good names found here. One that's even in Cyrillic. That's pretty cool.